Final Fantasy VII was groundbreaking when it was first released. Though the graphics haven't aged well, it pioneered 3D models and animation in gaming, and was visually stunning in 1997. It was the first in the series to really take off in the West, and holds a special place in many people's hearts as their first Final Fantasy. We were blown away by the mature storyline, fascinating setting, and of course, the music. The soundtrack echoed the harsh cyberpunk setting of the game with its use of heavy synthesizers and electric guitars. This wasn't wholly artistic choice. Like much of composer Nobuo Uematsu's best work, the decision was born of technological restrictions. The original PlayStation had the capacity to store and read CD-quality audio, and was able to support full orchestral recordings. But the game already took up 3 discs, and storing full recordings requires a ton of space. Not to mention, you have to ensure the music exists on the same disc as the gameplay that calls for it. And at that point, actually playing the game becomes complicated. Instead, they made the decision to use the PlayStation's onboard sound card, which naturally lent itself to a synthesized techno-rock feel. Over the years, this iconic soundtrack has been rescored, re-released, remixed, revisited, reorchestrated, and finally, after 5 long years of waiting, remade. The Final Fantasy VII Remake is so much more than just a visual upgrade to its 1997 counterpart. It replaces hand-animated characters with full actor motion capture, upgrades fixed camera placement to dynamic gameplay cinematography, and forgoes the turn-based ATB system for seamless action RPG combat. Masashi Hamauzu and Mitsuo Suzuki take Nobuo Uematsu's original scores and flesh out new arrangements of old tracks, taking into consideration the new ways music has to be implemented in the game to match the modern playstyle. They also craft a number of new tracks featuring old motifs, taking advantage of 20 years of evolution in music styles to add more color to the metal, Mako-lit undercity of Midgar. This first installment focuses on our time set in the cyberpunk dystopia of Midgar, stretching a 7-hour portion of the original game into just over 40 hours of a full, cohesive story, allowing a deep exploration of the city, landscape, people, and the music. When you first boot up the game, after the hour-and-a-half long wait downloading the game data, you sit down to play for the first time, and they make absolutely sure to draw you in with that sense of coming home. This piece has been present with the franchise since the original Final Fantasy released in 1987. It was written in under half an hour. Deceptive in its simplicity, the Prelude is just a series of arpeggios, notes in a chord played in a repeating pattern, creating a soothing, ethereal sound. The sound limitations of the NES required that no more than 3 notes be played at a time, and severely restricted how long a piece of music could be before it repeated. Final Fantasy VII begins with a haunting reverb on an electronic synth, tracing lazy patterns through the familiar chords, marrying the fantasy feel the series had been known for up to that point, with the new, gritty sci-fi direction it was about to take. But even on the PlayStation sound card, hints of a fuller orchestration were there. As string and woodwind chords join, a countermelody brought in on the horns after the first 16 bars. Each modern remake of this piece of music has featured the harp on the familiar arpeggio, a natural choice. But the remake takes this expectation and modifies it to faithfully recreate the mood in the original game. Harp is overlaid with a crystal synth and given a hefty amount of reverb to feel grounded in an orchestral setting, but still carry that sense of sci-fi. 16 bars in, when our countermelody is expected to enter, we're treated to the addition of a deep tubular bell and a drum cadence. Drum cadence is a musical shorthand for military. When you hear it, it immediately pulls to mind thoughts of marching and of war. This small addition to the Prelude foreshadows the police state of Shinra's public security division and the ever-looming war with Wutai. "16 bars later, the countermelody is handed off to the horns, again driving home that military march sensation, pulling us out of any semblance of serenity garnered by the original Prelude, with a stronger drumline and the woodwinds giving ascending trills of fanfare and excitement. This prelude teases us with bits of Final Fantasy's lesser-known main theme. And it's amazing how perfectly this would blend into our prelude with that heavy march feel. But that isn't where we're going. The prelude gives us all this pent-up energy and excitement to play. But the eternal question in game music is, how do I get back to the beginning again? Game music needs to be able to repeat eternally. This piece of music will play for no more than a few seconds for most people as they hit new game and transition into the opening scene. But you have to design your game to loop for hours as someone grabs dinner, flips the laundry, takes the dogs out, wakes up after falling asleep because they had to wait for an hour and a half for the game to install after getting hooked on the demo. So, after 3 repeats of our theme, each increasing in intensity, we wind up for some big fanfare that moves into another build-up for a finale, and it holds us for what feels like forever in suspense. Before releasing us back into that dream-like arpeggio with the lingering strings as the only thing tying us to what came before. In this way, the remake's prelude is so much more than coming home to old friends. It tells us the story we're about to embark on in 3 short minutes. A sci-fi fantasy set in a militarized police state with strong cinematic elements. Each piece of meticulously crafted music in the soundtrack is worth examining for the way they influence the storytelling of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. But the official soundtrack spans 7 CDs and contains over 150 tracks, And even that doesn't fully catalog all the music in the game, with scored-to-picture cutscenes and quiet motivic references that play as introduction to areas or transitions between songs. So I feel the only way to do an analysis like this justice is to explore the music as it's intended to be heard, through gameplay. Join me next time as we explore the nostalgia-filled cinematic joyride that is the bombing mission.